Coaches of Reddit, what is your favorite "my kid should be playing" story? When I was in Little League, I was talking to an umpire who had been doing it for 25 years. He said he's coached everything from professional games to college game, and he's never had to throw a coach out of a game until he started umping Little League. I had read that in the pros, very seldom do the coaches get tossed for real reasons. Most of the time they ask to be tossed or moral and show. I volunteered to coach in a city St. Louis kids in football when I was in law school. It was a YMCA based team for 3rd 6th graders, so the goal was really just to have fun and occupy the kids. I had a starting lineup, but everyone got to play. Naturally, there were plenty of kids who were terrible at football who just showed up for free babysitting, but I worked with all of them. One day, before practice, a dad I had never met comes up to me and says, "Yo coach, listen man, you know you don't have to play my kid Andre, right?" I asked him who his kid was, and then told him that I was just going to play all the kids anyways. The dad looks me in the eye and goes, "No, coach, really? Just look at him." I turn to look, and while one of my assistants is lining up the offense, Andre, a supposed wide receiver, is lying face down in the grass with his arms and legs spread out like a starfish. Andre's dad and I proceed to watch as the ball is snapped and Andre just doesn't bother to move. The cornerback guarding Andre just sat down next to him and watched the rest of the play. ESPN 30 for 30, the Andre Johnson story. More like, why won't you let my kid embarrass and hurt himself? I coached a town league baseball team of 11 and 12-year-olds. The league was really big on safety for pitchers. 50 pitch or 3 inning max, no curveballs, runners can't lead off, etc. I got a kid who had just moved to town, and his dad talked to me non-stop on how this kid was the greatest pitcher ever. The problem is the kid had the worst pitching mechanics of all time. To get around the no curveball rule, the dad apparently came up with this stupid pitching motion where he would have his son lean 45 degrees off center with his arm fully extended with his elbow locked and chop down when he pitched. If you know baseball, you can see there are about 5 things wrong with this. Not only is the motion impossible to throw strikes from, but you are just begging to frick up your son's shoulder by teaching him to throw that way. I offered to teach him the correct way to throw, and told them both that if he went back to the shoulder destroyer pitch he wouldn't get another chance at being on the mound. Well, a few weeks later I'll let him pitch. First batter goes fine. First pitch of the second batter, back to the stupid motion. I walk out to the mound and remind him not to do it. Second pitch, same stupid motion. Third pitch, he hits the batter. I pull him and his dad flips out, takes all of his equipment out of the dugout and tells me they quit. This one is really freaking horrible. He basically taught his son to ignore coaching staff, embarrassed him in front of teammates and their families, and is setting his kid up for a lifetime of injuries because he thinks he knows better. I used to coach hockey and watched many a minor hockey game as both a coach and a parent. Worst thing I ever saw, much in the same vein as the other "he should not be playing" stories, was this. Minor hockey week game. Parent from opposing team had one foot on a spectator bench and the other on the dasher so he could get over the glass, and he yelled at one of their players something along the lines of, "If you're not going to play then get off the ice." I felt so bad for whoever the kid was and hoped, in some ways, it wasn't his, because that ride home would have been terrible for the kid. I would have told him he couldn't do that then if he did it again, have him removed from the arena if I was the scorekeeper for that game. Coached a U10 girls soccer team. The skill and maturity gap between each of the girls was astounding. Some of the kids were legitimately good players, the rest were less so. I struggled to find playing time for one of my players, not because I didn't sub her in enough, but because she would literally just wander off the field and start playing in the dirt. Like, in the middle of a game, it'd have to count how many players I had because sometimes she'd just wander away. It is more of a "that kid shouldn't be playing" story than a "my kid should be playing" story, but I once had a dad approach me and try to bribe me $50 to prevent a certain kid from playing in our upcoming flag football game. These were 6-year-old kids. The kid did make a costly mistake in the previous game, but the fact that this random dad was willing to pay me to bench the kid was mind-blowing. I will make him an offer he can't refuse. When my dad coached my little league team, we had a dad that loudly in front of the whole team, kept demanding his son play catcher. My dad relented one day, even though we had a really good catcher, because it's just little league, no big deal. In one inning, the kid had 3 passed balls. Also, on one of the times he caught a ball, someone stole home. You can't start stealing until the ball is caught. I don't really have an explanation to how that happened. He just basically didn't tag him. The dad's response was to blame the equipment provided. He then bought his kid his own set of catching equipment and demanded that was superior equipment. His son was now better. My dad tried to let him catch again, and on the first stolen base he promptly threw the ball into the pitcher's mound. My dad was always nice and encouraging to the kid, but man, just don't set your kid up to fail like that. 3 passed balls isn't that bad for little league, unless we're talking travel ball. Why doesn't my kid do more playing? Because he plays outfield and does nothing but pick flowers and cry. I don't think he wants to be here. I'm not a coach, but I've seen some crap from being in little league. My 7th grade football coach's son was a big boy and played O-line, but he wanted to score touchdowns. So his dad's offensive strategy was to put all the big linemen, including his son, in a wishbone formation and then put the little guys on the O-line to block for them. He called it the beef backfield. We dominated that season, and I learned how to chop block. Oh yeah, at that age a big kid with momentum is unstoppable. In Pop Warner football, each player must play a minimum of 10 plays per game. I had the assistant coaching job of making sure that happened and documenting it. What made it hard was parents over my shoulder. They knew that if I told the coach a kid has to go in, he goes in. So I heard my kid should be playing the entire game. As an assistant coach on my son's football team, I was often the chosen one to handle situations. I had one parent that showed up for only one of his son's games complain that he wasn't getting enough playing time. I professionally advised him that his son as well as the other kids all got playing time and his son would get more time on the field if he showed up to practice on time and not 30 minutes late. I also advised the father that his son was not putting forth his best effort and his playing time is limited to reduce him getting hurt as well as his teammates. And that's when it kind of went to crap. This father then became irate and said, "Well, I bet your funkin' son plays all the time, coach." Calmly I replied, "Actually, my son also gets very limited playing time because he, like your son, is not applying himself on the field." Threw a bit of shade ending the conversation, which you would have noticed if you attended his games. He stomped away. His mother picked him up and was taking her son to practices and games after that. My son started applying himself towards the end and got a bit more playing time. The son of the father who whined turned it up big time after that and made first string. Good to see a happy ending in this one. Good for the kid, making first string. In 4th grade I begged my parents enroll me in soccer little league because my brother always played and it looked fun. Only problem was I'd never kicked a ball in my life and had zero skill knowledge of how to play team sports. Needless to say, I sucked big time. As in, wouldn't move on the field unless the coach called from the sidelines, move forward, take the ball from them, shoot it in, etc. I was clueless, non-competitive, and put on a very cringe-worthy show. At this point I didn't want to show up to games practices anymore because this was obviously not my jam, but my parents encouraged me to stick it out. Near the end of every season, an all-star league was put together by selecting all of the top players from each team, basically to put talent against talent for an exciting game. The coach posted the list of members that made the cut for the all-star team and I was very relieved when I didn't see mine. I was finally free. My dad, however, had something to say about this. I was so focused on not seeing my name on the list that I didn't realize that I was the only person from my team that didn't make the cut. I know his heart was in the right place, but he was so focused on protecting my feelings. He must have thought I felt betrayed being the odd man out, that he went to the coach, had some strong words, and excitedly came back to tell me that I had made the all-star team. Now 10-year-olds are not stupid. I knew that the coach and my entire team didn't actually want me on the team. I sucked and I knew it. I didn't earn my place on the team, and that felt worse than being cut from the team ever could. so I suffered through an extra week of practice and spent almost all of the final game on the bench. I still have the giant all-star trophy I got at the end of it all. It serves as a reminder that kids know more than you think and they are able to tell when they actually do a good job that they can feel proud of versus a hollow accomplishment that is more or less given to them with no qualifications or effort. Coached a minor, 9 and 10 little league baseball team to get volunteer hours in high school. I wanted the kids to have fun, but I also wanted to win, so we had a pretty standard position pitching rotation. We were playing against the team the league's commissioner coached and he approached us. Tell us that one of the mothers thought we weren't being fair with our pitching rotation. We immediately knew whose mother it was, the only mother to give us complaints. A mother to arguably the worst ball player I've ever seen. I get it, he's 9 years old, but a 0.00 batting average and an arm like a wet spaghetti noodle is something special even for little league. Myself and my good buddy, also assistant coach, made the call to send her kid into the bullpen to get warmed up to pitch. We knew the kid wouldn't throw a single strike. The mom knew. We even let the umpires and the other team's coach know. But we started him anyways. The first half inning took about 30 minutes. He walked in 7ish runs, whatever the single inning mercy rule was at the time, and that was that. Never heard a complaint from that parent again. Poor kid having to endure that because of his mother. Had a dad come up and say exactly that. All I had to do was point. I'm sorry sir, she actually would be playing if she was here, but that's your daughter over there throwing her sweatshirt up and getting it stuck in the basketball hoop instead of focusing on the game. It was because she didn't want to be there. I had a parent angrily confront me because her daughter wasn't getting any time in a soccer game. I explained to her that her daughter was one of 2 goalies, and she was going to play the second half. She turned and walked away without saying a word. Her tone warranted a thank you, if not an apology. Soccer parents are the worst humans. Source: played soccer for 12 years. Referee for 2 years. I'm a volunteer coach for youth basketball and I get a ton of parents coming up to me asking to play their kids more. I always play everyone and try to make sure that everyone plays meaningful minutes, but a lot of the times it's the player who doesn't want to play all that much. Once when I was coaching little kids, 6-8-year-olds, I had brothers on my team. The younger brother, the 6-year-old, was probably the best player on the team for the simple fact that he was coordinated enough to be able to dribble without looking at the ball. The older brother, 7 I think, absolutely hated basketball. I've never met a kid who hated basketball more in my entire life. He was afraid of the ball, afraid of any contact, and would usually cry during any practice if he got tired. With younger kids it's important that you don't push them too hard. You want them to enjoy the sport first and become good later. So I would always ask him during games if he wanted to play. He would always refuse, so I would make him my assistant coach to try to keep him engaged during games. One day after practice his mom came up and asked me to play her older son. Let's call him Luke. Next game, even if he refused to go in, she was afraid that Luke was becoming jealous of his younger brother and thought he needed some tough love. So the next game I told Luke that he was going to have to play. He looked at me like I told him I murdered Santa. Sometime in the middle of the first half I called a timeout and turned to Luke and said, "Alright buddy, it's time. Don't be nervous. Just go out there and have fun. You're going to do great." The rest of his teammates, brother especially, were encouraging him to go out there. We even broke the huddle by saying, "Luke." The rest of the team went out to the court and he just stood there motionlessness and looked up. So I leaned down and told him that it was going to be great fun. He slowly walked onto the court, a good dozen feet away from any of the other players, and just watched while the game started. The other team turned the ball over, which is essentially all basketball is at that age, and a teammate passed the ball to Luke yelling, "Luke, catch." Luke stood there as the ball came towards him, let it hit him in the face, and fell down like he was shot by a sniper. I rushed on the court to see if he was okay, and by the time I got there I noticed he peed his pants and was crying. The ref stopped the game and his parents came onto the court to help him off and hide the fact that he had peed. Luke never showed up to practice again. Well, I am not a coach, but when I was a kid there was this father that really believed in his kid, but didn't really get the attention the father thought he deserved. So what did this dude do? He went on to be the assistant coach, and always made sure his kid got most playing time and got to take all the free kicks and penalties. The kid became an above average football, read soccer few Americans, player but never made it outside state. Not a coach, but a wrestler's older sister, so I've been around the mat enough to know what's up. My brother's team is based in a small town, like population 2000 plus small, so you know we don't have a lot of funding. Enter one of the richest guys in town. It's not that hard to gain that title here, but this guy owned 3 convenience stores in the area and very friendly to everyone, so he was well known. He and his family were also the only Indian family within a 30-mile radius, so they stuck out like a sore thumb. Can't miss the guy. Let's call him Singh. Not his real name. Anyway, I guess Singh wanted his son to be the typical all-American kid, so he wanted him to be in the first lineup for the team rather than a backup. When he didn't get that, he proceeded to bribe the coaches by paying for all of the uniforms and their transportation to tournaments. Since it technically wasn't a bribe and there were no other words exchanged about the matter, Singh's son was on the lineup. The thing is, Singh's son was a rude tubby little crap that would only be put on the mat if kids were in his weight class, which was rarely, but it still made some people pee off. TLDR. Rich Indian guy bribes coaches with paid uniforms so his son could be on the lineup. That's the thing about wrestling. There is no hiding how bad or good a kid is, and there are eliminations to start at your weight. Win and you start, lose and you don't. Wrestling parents may scream and holler at matches, but there is no questioning the starting lineup. I once dated a girl whose mom was the epitome of crazy soccer mom. Her son was a fairly good soccer player who was a freshman in high school. My brother just happened to be the varsity soccer coach of that school. This mom would literally call me daily to ask if my brother, the coach, had made decisions if he would play varsity or not. It got so bad one day she asked if I wanted to go get dinner with her and talk about what needs to be done to get her son on varsity. If she was sexy it might have been cool, but I just ended up telling her that I'm not the coach and I don't have any say on who plays or not. The girl you were dating was probably mortified. I wasn't his coach but his teammate in baseball. Basically every weekend during the summer, we had a tournament at some high school field in the area. On the final game one weekend, our best pitcher was expecting to start in the final game, except when that game came, he was on the bench. He immediately yelled what when he saw the lineup and began complaining loudly so the coach could hear him. Then he ran up to the bleachers to tell his dad he wasn't starting in front of all the parents. When he came back to the dugout, he was full on bawling his eyes out. The entire game he was just sulking with the occasional tear by himself. This is something you'd expect from maybe an 8-year-old. But no, we were about to be juniors in high school. It was funny as heck honestly. I was coaching my 6-year-old's baseball game. Well, it started to sprinkle and I saw lightning a little ways off. I pulled my kids from the field. The other coach came out screaming that they still want to play. I told them I saw lightning and I am not endangering these kids. The parents from the other team started screaming at me, let them play. The other coach was fine with them playing because the president of the league's team was still playing on the other field. About 5 minutes into the argument it started pouring down rain so the game got called anyway, but parents are stupid. I was a referee and have had to make the call for 16 concurrent games to be cancelled for lightning. That should not have been my responsibility as a 15-year-old, but the referee commissioner was AWOL. He got replaced the following year thankfully. Not a coach, but when I was young my stepmother was often a total pain in the butt at my various sporting events. She's a pretty big sports fan and very competitive. I was never a superstar but I tried my best. Anyway, during a summer league softball game we were doing pretty badly, and the coach decided to give me a shot at pitching, which was something dear to my heart. As soon as he indicated that I was to take the mound my stepmother began heckling him and me, and shouted through the entire inning that putting me in as pitcher was a stupid decision. I didn't do badly, but I probably would have done much better if I didn't have tears running down my face the whole time. Well crap, I am allowed. Competitive stepmom and this hurt to read. I hope I have never made my kids feel that way. I can honestly say I have never done anything like you described, but I can cheer pretty loudly and obnoxiously for them. During cross country, my daughter said she could hear me cheer, yell, everywhere on the course. Sorry she did that to you. That was terrible. Not exactly what you're asking for, but in kindergarten I signed up for baseball. They put me on first base and in about 30 seconds I started drawing in the sand. I drew so much and never even paid attention. I just waited to be up to bat the whole time, and if I ever got out somehow, I would always deny it and try to run away to the first base. I didn't know any baseball rules, and if my coach told me to get out, I would. But I would cry. My dad ended up apologizing to the coach after every game and giving the coach permission to sit me out. I played catcher in t-ball. I was that bad. There were 2-3 times I had to actually try to throw the ball to the coach on the pitcher's mound. Once I threw it and hit the batter as hard as I could in the back of the helmet. As I got a little bit older and was into softball, I wound up in left field because I was the only girl on the team able to send the ball back to first. I have managed Little League Baseball for 10 years, 15-16 seasons. Early in my career I learned that parents will push you if you don't set expectations right from the start. So I would send out a series of emails to parents and follow up with the players at practice to share my vision for the team and the season. I had 3 rules that would be reinforced most every practice and game. 1. Give your best effort every time. 2. Treat your teammates, coaches, officials, and the other team with respect and good sportsmanship. And 3. Every player will play every position at some point in the season. Things went pretty smoothly, no issues with players or parents, until year 9. One player, who I had specifically requested be on my team because I knew he was having a hard time at home and school due to a parent's illness and because he would probably not do very well under the dominating style of the other team's coaches, just didn't get the whole 3 rules above and wanted to be treated like a special little snowflake. If he didn't get his way, he would sulk and leave the field, and he was a mediocre player at best, no star by any stretch. So long story short, after several incidents and multiple discussions with the player, parent, my coaches, and league officials, this player gets himself kicked off the team right before the playoffs start for repeatedly failing to follow the team rules. Not my preference, but he had many chances and his behavior was quite negative to the team dynamic. So about 2 weeks later, the parent contacts me and wants to know if her child made the all-star team. I knew right then that the player inherited his self-centered cluelessness from his mother. Obligatory, not a coach but a player. Growing up I was always less than athletic. In 3rd grade soccer when the coach asked me my favorite position I said subs. I legitimately thought standing on the sidelines drinking Gatorade was a position. This trend continued on through 7th grade, where there was one particular game where I wasn't playing. My dad came storming across the field at halftime and started yelling at the coach in front of me and all my teammates. I knew I sucked but it didn't bother me too much. I was mortified and ultimately my dad said, "Let's go," and like Flynn, we're leaving, and I said no and stayed. As I type this I imagine that was pretty embarrassing for my dad too. Not a coach, and this doesn't even involve a parent, but it's basically the same. Our senior year of high school our varsity soccer team was pretty good for our county and ended up going to our regional finals. Our county had a rule though that if you were a senior on a team that didn't have enough players to do cuts then you automatically made varsity. Not a rule that I disagree with, but we had one kid on our team who was only on varsity because of this rule. To his credit he had played all 4 years and always tried his best. He just wasn't very good. He was being 3-4 through the season. Half time of a pretty important game the kid is visibly frustrated and not really paying attention. Coach asks him if he has somewhere he wants to be. Kid looks him dead in the eye and says, "I want to be out here," while pointing to the field. I'll never forget the deadpan look on our coach's face as he emotionlessly said, "Well, you have to learn that." Holy crap. I'm shocked we all held it together at that. Was it a bit harsh? Maybe. The kid did everything he could for 4 years to earn that spot but just couldn't. At the same time, this wasn't a recreational league for fun or practice. I'm a firm believer that once you get to high school level you play your best players and you play to win each game, even if that means hurt feelings. Still, Coach Potts, you're cold-blooded. I'm not a coach, but I have a ridiculous story about a coach from when I played fricking Little League. This dude was serious. We were all 7-8 years old, so it was generally a very light-hearted league, but not for him. Oh no. He would scream at his players when they made errors, and loudly berate his own son after games if he didn't perform to his standards. But one day, he went over the line. His team was in the field, and one of our better players had just stepped up to bat. This kid had, earlier in the game, had hit a 1 RBI triple or something, and was having a really good day. So what does Super Coach decide to do? Orders his pitcher to intentionally walk the kid. I crap you not. In a children's little league game that absolutely no one cares about, this man was intentionally walking a kid to prevent him from scoring. The boos from the stands were deafening. Well, as deafening as a crowd of like 30 can be. And the father of the kid who was being walked actually stomped out onto the field, took his son and drove home while cursing out the coach. It was freaking ridiculous. We ended up winning the game anyway. This isn't so much of a my kid should play but rather a this is what you're doing wrong story. YMCA soccer, 3-4 year olds. At this stage the idea is to just get them outside running around, making friends, having fun, taking them off their parents' hands for an hour. We call it Beehive ball as there are simply 14, or however many kids running around chasing the ball. Halftime comes around and a father approaches me and says, "Coach, I see what the problem is." At this point I didn't realize there was a problem, so I was curious. "What would the problem be?" I asked. He says the kids aren't playing their positions. I was done. Couldn't find anything productive to say, so I just left it with they're 3-4 years old. Vertical is enough of a position for me. So, I'm raising my nephew, a story for another thread, and he's running cross country. One of the other parents came up to the new coach and just about bullied him into putting her kid on the varsity team. Now, to be on varsity you're supposed to be one of the 10 fastest people on your team. Her son ended up being one of the slowest and he was the kid who always talked crap and blamed bad races on other people. Of course he got super expensive shoes and stuff, and my nephew would just destroy him in races with his hand-me-down spikes that I had worn twice when I was his age. I'm going to get him some new ones for track, because he just held himself to a high standard and busted butt in practice and races. Never once bragged about being as good as he actually is. Cross country is really difficult to argue varsity JV spots with. Numbers tell it all. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.